What's going on, everybody? Brian Carroll here with Dr. Stuart McGill. We are going to do the Q&A for the first few hundred people that grabbed gift of injury from powerxstrength.com in the first 96 hours. We got a lot of questions. Thank you for sending those in. Thank you for the support. I have to say that we got a lot of diverse questions, but also a lot of questions fell under the kind of the same category, if you will. So we will summarize a few of those. That way we're not too repetitive. But how you doing up there in Gravenhurst, Stu? You doing good?
I'm doing very well. It's apparently going down to minus 12 tonight, and I know that doesn't mean anything to you folks in Florida, but there you go.
Yeah, we're 75 degrees Fahrenheit right now, but we're getting a nasty thunderstorm for some reason. It's just what Florida does year round. We're just outside of hurricane season. Hey, we're glad to be here. Thank you so much for the support. So we're going to jump right into this. And I'm going to read questions to Stu, and he's going to read questions to me, and we're going to keep this thing moving along. So thank you once again. Dr. McGill, I read the book and I love it. I've also read Back Mechanic. I am rehabbing and have been successful in minimizing my pain. I'm extension intolerant this time and not 100% pain-free. Extension does bother my back a little bit, but I would like to do a bench-only meet anyway. Is this foolish?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, and I just will greet everyone as you did as well, Brian. So hello to everyone, and I too hope that the gift of injury was a very unique book for all of you. We started writing that, and neither of us had, we did have an original vision for it, but I think neither Brian nor myself really anticipated what it actually became, and we're both very pleased with it. So on to the extension question. Whenever we have a clinical question from an individual like this, the answer must always start with it depends. So what are some of the things that we would think about to come up with the most appropriate answer? Well, first of all, it depends on what is the mechanism of extensor pain. And are you replicating that in the bench press? And if it is, it may be a good idea to pass on the bench press for a while and allow yourself to desensitize. But follow the assessment in both Back Mechanic and gift of injury and see if you can hone in on what the cause is and then move in ways to remove the cause and allow the pain to desensitize. If it happens to be that you've irritated some facet joints, for example, which trigger with extension, those generally take a little bit longer to wind down than, say, pain coming from a disc. Now look at your movement mechanics. Say you're doing a strength maneuver. You're doing a squat. Squat down or just do a box squat. And then watch your spine in the first movement. Do you move your spine into extension as you're coming and driving off the box? If you are, now you see you're picking the scab or you're triggering that specific extensor pain mechanism. So you need to assess, videotape yourself, and see if you can see the pain trigger creeping into the strength test, and you'll realize A, why you're getting in pain, and B, why you're not healing. So there's a general process for answering that specific question.
Yeah, so I always tell people if extension on the bench press is bothering you and you're intolerant, you need to give it a break for a while and let it desensitize. But that's the science behind that question. That's my general answer. So moving on to the next question. Dr. McGill, do you believe that the squat, bench, and deadlift are dangerous when performed with a pristine form for the average gym goer? So I guess, are they inherently dangerous?
Well, I don't think any exercise is particularly dangerous. It becomes maybe an inappropriate exercise for a specific person with a specific injury history. There you go. But let's answer it generically, first of all. Every exercise is a tool to achieve a specific goal. So now we have to say, well, what's the goal? And I think the gift of injury guides the reader through this whole process of assessing what is the goal, what is the desired activity, and what variables are needed to do that. So obviously powerlifting, you need strength. If you're going to play American football, you need strength. If you want to compete in MMA and you have to lift an opponent, you need to lift. If you want to be a ping pong player, then probably those particular exercises might not be the best tool with the very best risk and reward. So to answer the question, is it dangerous? Well, if you have an 80-year-old osteoporotic woman, yeah, you'd probably be better choosing other exercises if you want to stop mineral loss and stop them from falling and all of these things that are much more important to them. But no, the key is good form, high stress concentrations to tissues that could be at risk, train with an appropriate volume and appropriate load, and then, as Brian, I hope you chime in on this one, appropriate rest and adaptation. Too many people think training more will be better, not realizing that the adaptation, and you're a prime example of this, in allowing your body to remodel and adapt. But you know, danger is relative. Failure to do some of these things might be even more dangerous.
Yeah, I can't think of too much more dangerous than getting in a car and driving down the road with a bunch of nuts on the road like we have now. So dangerous is relative to what you're doing. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that we don't think twice about. Texting while driving, I would say, is more dangerous than the bench squat or deadlift. So anyway, speaking of MMA, Stu, how about George St. Pierre last weekend?
Yeah, I couldn't watch it simply because you know, I do know George, or I knew him 10 years ago, I must say, and I have a little soft spot for him, and no, I just can't watch it anymore. But interestingly enough, I had a colleague who texted me after every round to tell me how things were going. But it's an extraordinary story. Anyway, Brian, let me ask you a question now. Brian, do you get massage currently, and do you foam roll?
Good question. That's a common one too when I tell my story about the back injury. And I used to foam roll my back mindlessly. I would throw myself onto the ground, further perpetuating my injury. And then I would roll on my back as hard as I could, trying to roll out my back pain. And I use fake little quotes here because that's the impression that I had when I was actually further causing my pain by rolling my back. So immediately after stopping the throwing myself on the ground to foam roll and moving better and no more further foam rolling on my back started to desensitize a lot quicker. With that said, you need to understand why you foam roll, and if you're thinking about doing it, you need to have a specific purpose for why you do it. I guess the jury's out on a lot of the research with foam rolling, whether it works or not. I like to roll my lateral quads and my hamstrings and my glutes a little bit. Ideally, you'll go to see a trained massage therapist. I see one every week, and it's going to be better. And you're going to have a professional working on you and being delicate in certain areas, especially your back, where you don't want anyone just poking and prodding around and hurting you, especially if you have an injury history. But what I get worked on every week depends on, again, the goal and how I'm feeling, what's tight on me, what's bothering me. My neck might be bothering me, my hips might be bothering me, my knees might be bothering me. So it's always going to be dependent upon what I need at the time. If I don't need a massage, I'll get a scalp massage and just relax. I don't want to be loose. So to answer your question, I get spot work done, and I do roll my lower body from time to time. But again, it's only when I need it. Don't want to be loose. Looseness is the enemy of power. So I always teeter on being just tight enough where I can perform with explosive power, but I don't want to take too much of that edge off where I'm loose and I have a little bit of give in my joints and muscles under load.
Yeah, I think we discussed this quite a bit in the book. Anything that creates mobility It has to be a tuned mobility in the strength athlete, because it's always a combination of strength plus elasticity. Whether you're a power athlete with speed and you're throwing something, or you're preparing for collision, or you're moving basically an immovable object, which is what powerlifting is, you want the combination of primed elastic recoil on which you put the muscle strength on top of to create the performance and this linkage that you need. You're creating a jack of the linkage in your body, basically.
Yeah, the common theme in gift of injury is have a purpose for what you're doing and tune and hone those tools in for the basic demands of your sport. Don't just do anything just because your favorite social media hero is doing it or if it's popular. Again, always check yourself with these things that could lead to a dark road for you, like what ended up happening with me. So switching gears, back to you, Stu. This kind of dovetails with the other question that we just had, so it's kind of nice. What are your thoughts on chiropractic adjustments overall for a healthy spine? For instance, hip adjustments, moving the lumbar and sacral areas when they get really tight.
Well, the answer, this is a specific question, and the answer is it depends once again. We have to understand the mechanism that's causing the reason for the person to want to seek a chiropractic adjustment. So my first question would be, why do you need to go and have something addressed? What is the cause? Have you eliminated that cause? There's no sense in keeping the cause repeated and then having a treatment. But on chiropractic adjustments specifically, we're one of the few groups that have actually measured what is going on during the spinal manipulation. And, this idea of putting something mechanically back into place, really, we haven't been able to measure and find evidence to support that. But we have measured some substantial neurological change within 300 milliseconds of the manipulation of the cavitation of the crack, indicating that there's some sort of neurological short loop reflex going on. So, for example, right after a manipulation, I remember us having a gymnast with a local muscle spasm in one of the abdominal oblique muscles. In other words, a muscle well away from the spine. And within 300 milliseconds, the background tone of that muscle spasm was noticeably reduced. And yet, other times, we've measured new muscle spasms being created with an adjustment. But having said all of that, I'm wary when I hear, someone has multiple chiropractic adjustments that seem never ending. I'm a bit wary of that. But I wouldn't be against having 2 or 3 manipulations and seeing if that performs the strategic release that will really help that person. And I'm going to say this about chiropractors as well. They are a very non-homogeneous group. So if you go to one chiropractor, you might get something very different than another chiropractor. But some of the best spine docs that I know of are chiropractors. They are fantastically skilled with manual soft tissue skills, with things like ART and Graston techniques. They're fantastic at releasing tissue post-surgery, all these kinds of things. In other words, the manipulation is just one of the tools that they have in their very vast toolbox. And then I meet some other chiropractors that I'm very dismayed with their practice. So you get the full spectrum, so you see why, once again, the answer is it depends.
Yeah, I think that, Stu, you may agree that I think the chiropractors now are more educated and versatile with the soft tissue. Before it was like whatever they called it, the Fantastic Seven that they would do on everybody, the neck, the hip, the knee, the foot, the ankle, and then they would, crack you, then see you back next week. And unfortunately, it's given a bad name to a lot of the chiropractors. And personally, Dr. Mary D. Vale, Amy Bernstein, and Dr. Adam Crosby here in town, they all use a lot of soft tissue work before they even look to adjust you. They address you with Graston and art therapy, and it's worked really well for me. And again, it's a tool. You don't just use every tool at once. If it's necessary, you pull it out, you try it out, you apply. If it doesn't work, you put it back, try something else.
Yeah, there are certain chiropractors around the world that I refer patients to. I can think of many top shelf athletes in different sports, and I do my best effort in removing the cause, setting up training and movement patterns to build the foundation for pain-free movement. But they might have a little nag or a snag. They might have a nag in the quadratus lumborum that won't let go. I do not have manual skills in my hands to deal with that, but I send them to my guru, chiros, and 2 or 3 sessions, and they will release that little nag or snag, and now everybody looks good. The athlete looks good, my work looks good, the chiro looks good. So it was a team effort for those particular situations. Okay, Brian, I'm going to ask you a question now. How are you currently training right now? Coming in from one of our buyers.
Currently training right now. I'm training for health and general fitness, honestly. Attacking weak points. A few of the weak points that can never be strong enough for me in general for day-to-day life, whether I'm powerlifting or not, is grip strength, core endurance, and overall more cardiac endurance. So I'm walking a lot. I'm doing the McGill 3 every day. And I'm really training my weak points. I'm pulling from blocks. I'm squatting with the safety squat bar, and I'm floor pressing, because all of these do cater to my weak points and attack them, but they're also better on my body. I can get in a lot better positioning with the floor press, with the safety squat bar squat, and then, of course, pulling off of the blocks. And I've had fun with training lately. I took about 3 months off from any kind of training other than walking and core stability work. From March all the way to June. So that's the first time in 20 years that I really took some time off and actually finished up working on gift of injury with Stu. But right now it's maintenance and general health and kind of knocking some rust off. So I'm actually enjoying training right now more than I have in a long time. And I guess a lot of the pressure's off in a lot of ways, with a lot of obstacles and goals checked off my list. So I'm going to up my walking quite a bit in the next few weeks and up my training volume a little bit, but really just want to be in better shape, be healthier. Stu, I'm only in moderate pain while squatting and deadlifting, and as long as it's lightweight. Should I back off the weight and rehab to build some capacity, or can I build this capacity while lifting lightweight still? That's kind of along the lines of the bench press question, I guess, but this one actually includes moderate pain with the squat and the deadlift.
Yeah, I would really need to assess this on a case-by-case basis. So the answer is, yet again, it depends. But the most simplistic generic answer would be pain isn't normal. Try and get rid of the pain. And pain does not very good things to the strength athlete. It's terribly inhibiting. All sorts of typical patterns come. For example, if you have hip pain, generally that will shut down the glutes and facilitate the psoas. So now you're not squatting very well. And the same with low back pain as well. So I would suggest try and get out of pain, follow the program in the book, and apply it to you, and you will converge on the best way to get rid of that pain now. But sometimes it's just backing off for a while, let the pain trigger desensitize.
Yeah, like the generic answer, if someone asks me and I don't have much information, is back off, give some time to heal up, earn your right to build that capacity again to load the bar. Because if you rush it, or if you don't really take the time to take a step back, to take 2 steps forward, you might end up finding yourself in a bad way. It might not be a couple months, might not be for a couple of years, but it will eventually catch up to you. And Stu and I can name a bunch of people that it has, and me being a good example of that. Stu, I've worked my way through back mechanic and have been back pain free for some time now. I'm back to lifting, but I still have some remnants of nerve tingling, not pain, in my lower leg ankle from the nerve root coming from approximately L5S1. Again, no pain, and I notice this going away slowly. Is this normal to take longer than the back pain to subside?
Well, the answer is this certainly occurs in people. It's not rare, but there are several things to consider. For the questioner, have you been pristine in your movement patterns? Really trying to spare, if you have tingling pain, most likely you'll have a disc bulge irritating that particular nerve root. So the appropriate movement will get the disc to settle. Consider the position of respite. Now, we didn't cover that in Gift of Injury, but it's in my book, Back Mechanic. For most posterior disc bulges, in most strength athletes, that position is just prone laying. Lay on your tummy. You may place your head on one side or another. You may have your neck neutral and hands palms down under your chin. Just lay on your tummy and allow your back to relax. Did we have that in the book, Brian, or is that in Back Mechanic? I've written too many books now and I forget.
We gloss over it. It's very thorough in Back Mechanic, step by step, but I talk about some of the tricks and tips you taught me to help get my pain to settle, and one of them includes that, and one of them also includes hanging from the pull-up bar and slowly picking your feet up off the ground and letting the traction happen only as your back lets you.
Right. Well, before the traction of hanging, and I've got a little sub-story on that one, simply laying prone once again, and then as you inhale, your body will rise, and as you exhale, imagine in your brain your low back falling to the table. So with each breath, you're just slowly working your spine back into all of those nice natural curves. And it's the natural curves that allows your spine to de-stress. So I do suggest that. Certainly if you are doing any nerve flossing, to try and get the nerve roots to floss and move and take away some of that radiating symptom following the L5S1 tract. Always precede nerve flossing with that position of respite to see if we can get some freedom for the nerves to move past what is most likely sounding like a disc bulge here. Then Brian suggested hanging from a bar. Now, most of the time that works, but not always. Sometimes the tingling that the person experiences down the leg is relieved if you pull on the legs and increased if you pull from above. So when you're hanging from a bar, that's pulling from above. So you have to sort this out. Try hanging from a bar and see if that is the secret sauce that takes the tingling out of your legs. It may even make it worse, but that test will tell you. But when you're laying prone, also have a buddy pull your feet away and apply the traction from the foot end. And sometimes that is the secret sauce for relieving the pressure on the nerve root, taking the pain away. So one might make it worse, the other might make it better, they both might make it better. You don't know until you try it. But you could also try a little nerve flossing, and there's guidance on that in Back Mechanic. But once you've done that and you're under control, I would go back and start following the philosophy, the general philosophy in Gift of Injury. Okay, can I ask you a question now, Brian?
Let's do it.
Unless you want to add a little bit to that. You did a little nerve flossing, I recall.
Yeah, a little bit. And what tended to help me was the pull-up position. I would, after every lifting session, as I was coming back, I would do the face down on the floor. I would hang from the pull-up bar slightly, kind of on my toes, and I would just listen to my body. And I would kind of make notes to what exacerbated the pain and what made the pain a little bit better. But I did have the tingling for quite a bit longer after my what I would say, my actual back pain. Once that was gone, But after a while, all that tingling was just gone and never came back, thankfully. But it took some trial and error.
I can also say that in some of our senior lifters and strength athletes, we routinely have them hang from a bar after a single lift or perhaps a double lift. And that is part of the approach to keep building resilience as they train. But that seems to be particularly important for the senior lifter and the senior athlete. Okay, Brian, are you ever currently, sorry, I can't read. Brian, are you currently ever in pain from all the years of lifting so much weight?
I can honestly say that I have zero day-to-day pain, specifically back pain. I have minor aches and pains, and I'll get to a funny story in a minute, but my joints ache a little bit. My shoulder might be a little bit dry. My hips, I'm sure I have arthritis in them, but I feel good day to day, and I don't have to creak out of the bed and, iron myself out for an hour before I can move around, thankfully. But this has been through trial and error, and if I would have kept going the path I was 5 years ago, I can promise you that wouldn't be the case. But I am an athlete 24/7, the way I move, the things I put in my body, the choices I make day to day are, of course, contingent upon what my end goal is, and that's to be healthy. And if it's to move big weight, I have to conserve that athleticism and put deposits in my bank, if you will. So no, the funny story is my knees have been hurting lately, and I had a friend over after we just stained the deck. It rained that night, and the deck stain is awesome, and it's some aftermarket special stuff called Wood RX. But the problem is it leaves a coating on the wood for a long time. It's very heavy and thick. So as I was warning my neighbor to watch out for the stairs because they are very slick, I walked ahead of him and proceeded to show him how to fall down the stairs. And we actually caught it on our video monitoring system as it catches motion. And so the next day I told Stu, I said, hey, I got some good news. Is I didn't re-hurt my back. The bad news is I fell down the stairs and hurt my knee, and sent him the video. And you had a funny comment about that. He said, Brian, you're doing so well. If I could just keep you from falling down the stairs, I think we'll be good. So my knees are a little achy now, and that was about 4 months ago. Unfortunately, they bother me from time to time, and that's the first damn time that I've ever had any kind of a remnant or a flare-up or any kind of inflammation in my knees this whole time lifting. So you got to be careful. It's dangerous out there.
If I may, Brian, I'd like to chime in on that one. It is like we're writing a book again. We're just playing jazz back and forth on each little riff here. But, the question was, are you in pain after all the years of lifting? And I think back to the athletes that I've been involved with. The power athlete, the strength athlete with lots of good muscle around their torso, generally, if we can get them over, stop doing some of the things that are picking the scab and keeping them sensitized, we can get them, not always, but usually quite pain-free, or at least minimal pain when they retire. The ones that I'm more worried about are the highly mobile athletes, the ones who have a lot of movement in their spine. Those are the ones who get nasty arthritis and joint instability. And the rehab process is sometimes a bit more challenging. So that's an interesting perspective. Not always, but that would be a general observation, I would say.
Yep. So going back to one of the first questions that we covered tonight, is the bench press, squat, or deadlift inherently dangerous? No, we go with D, and that's stairs. Careful. Okay, so Stu, let's go back to you. Let's see. Okay, so this is going to be a little more complicated, a little more clinical here. Stu, how to help those with extremely tight and contracted quadratus lumborum and spinal erectors on same side as lumbar disc herniations, where various soft tissue treatments such as ART have been ineffective. In addition, do you have any nutritional suggestions that would aid in gristling of a damaged disc? So that's kind of a two-part complicated one there.
Well, I'll get rid of the second part right away and say I don't have any expertise in nutrition. So, I just use Dan John's quote, eat like an adult. And I'll just leave it at that. I think you can probably address some of the nutritional aspects much better than I can. But getting back to using ART and tight quadratus lumborum and whatnot, again, I can only say follow the algorithm in the book. Number one, remove the cause. Look at the movement, the chronic training postures, the chronic work postures throughout the day, whether they're sitting poorly or bending poorly, whatever it happens to be. Then do the interval walking as we described. And if they still have muscle issues at the end of doing all of that, I would say I would go back and try some of the soft tissue work again, because I do know this. The skill of the practitioner matters. I mean, we know all about Brian's injury from the book. I've had a lot of injury myself over the years. I've had hip replacement. I've had many top shelf so-called gurus work on various parts of my body at different times. And some of them have really hurt me, and some of them have allowed me to move pain-free for several months. So the skill of the practitioner really matters. So that's all I can really say there. I would try a different practitioner. If that person was to email me privately and tell me where they lived and a little bit more detail about their condition, I might be able to send them to someone who I would recommend, and I know it's a superior skill. Okay. Do you want to ask me one, or shall I ask?
Here's one of the more complicated ones. I think this is the most complicated one, and I'll do my best not to butcher it. Dr. McGill, I've been dealing with chronic low back pain since 2012. I got the following results from my MR July 2017. 4 to 5 mild arthrosis and mild diffuse disc bulge in central zone annular defect are noted. Minimal disc extrusion, got stuff going on with the discs. Both lateral recesses are moderately narrowed. L5S1's got a spondy and small disc herniation are seen. Impression 1, spondy and disc herniation on the right side of L5S1 could affect the exiting right L5 nerve. And number 2, diffuse disc changes and minimal extrusion at L4, L5 could affect the left and less likely the L5 nerve roots in the lateral recess. Is it wise, healthy to continue to squat and deadlift with this injury, and why?
Right. Well, first of all, they've given me the MRI results, and I never look at the MRs or the report until I've assessed the person. So you don't treat the MR, you treat the person. And Brian, you're the most perfect case to illustrate this. So I have to say, as a generic answer here, assess the person for their pain triggers, eliminate the pain triggers, and then build the foundation for pain-free movement. After we've done that, we then consider the MR results, because now we have a context to interpret them. The MRI shows both the wound and the scar. The feature that we're looking at on the MRI might be 2 days old. It might be 2 years or 20 years old. The radiologist just doesn't know. So if I can, again, start simply, use the book Back Mechanic to do the self-assessment of the pain. Some of the basic tests are there, then switch to gift of injury with the more strength-specific assessments of the pain triggers, and follow the process, and the MR might become a moot point. You don't have to really know about it, but in Brian's case, we saw the tremendous remodeling that went on when good movement is incorporated with good interval training, good progressions. It's quite a testament to using a logical, scientific, progressive approach. So that's how I would use it. Don't worry about the MRIs to start, but they may have context after you assess the person.
Yeah, so to answer the question, is it wise, healthy to continue to squat and deadlift with this injury? Well, if you have pain, and I would say absolutely not. You need to regress a couple steps, then earn your right to load again. And like Stu said about the scientific approach, there's still people out there that highly debate whether a deload or a regression in load after a few weeks is necessary. And we talk about it in the book a lot with the adaptations that are necessary for the bone to handle that load for a long period of time. It takes years to really build that capacity. So you do need weeks where you're down and you're giving your body ample rest. Do you have something you'd like to add to that, Stu, about deloads?
Not really. I think philosophically that's right on the money. You know, sometimes it's not a matter of being weak. Some people make the mistake of going right back to strength training, thinking that the cause of their pain is being weak. Not really. It might have real tissue damage, and that's the reason for the weakness. And once you give the time to the tissue to adapt, we use the term the tincture of time. Time itself is the healer in many cases. Be patient, don't be greedy. Build that foundation to support load. Then don't create stress concentrations in your body through poor technique. Great technique spreads it out and allows the adaptation process to continue in the best way.
All right, you want to read one for me?
Yeah. Brian, if you could do it all over again, what would you change about this process? So boy, that's a philosophical question.
We've talked about this on a few of the podcasts that we've done and over the last few weeks. So that's kind of a double-edged sword to answer this question, honestly, because on one hand, I wouldn't be in the position I am right now, having learned so much, co-authored this book with you, Stu, and really taken my knowledge to the next level and kind of completed me as an athlete, lifter, coach. So I wouldn't do anything over different other than the fact that by saying that, I'm still putting the people that are closest to me through what I did with the mood swings and the depression and, the clawing at, getting my athleticism back and all the suffering that I created around myself for other people. I wouldn't want to put someone through that again, but what would I change going forward? Just focusing on myself and what I would go through, I wouldn't change a thing because I had to learn the hard way through this process. So again, not to be insensitive to Rhea or those closest to me, but if it's just concerning me, I wouldn't have changed anything, and I would learn through the School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah, there's as many of you know, my son's an actor, and there was a television show in Canada called Being Erica. It's on CBC, our National Broadcasting Corporation. And the premise of the show was this woman, every episode would get regressed to a previous time in her life. And she had the option as to whether she would change the events or not, knowing that if she changed the events of 10 years ago, she would be in a different place now. And the moral of every episode was exactly the gift of injury or the gift of an experience that you learn from, for better or for worse, but it's made you the person who you are now. And boy, I can tell you, Brian, you came from a dark place, and you're I'm not saying you weren't a strong person before, but I hope you would agree that you're a stronger person for it. And I know every challenge I faced in life, it's what the game is all about.
Yes, and the message again resonates with a lot of people that that they think that they have this MR that shows them that they have a bad back or herniated discs or what have you, and they think, well, that's the end of me ever being pain free. I have to get surgery, never going to be able to lift again, and that's simply not the case. And if you don't take home anything else that we're talking about either today or from the book, understand that a back injury is not a life sentence, and we have example after example. You have to be open to learning and revisiting quite a few things like I had to do, but at the end of the day, it's far from a death sentence. And Stu, if you want to touch on that before we move to the next question. I think people have this idea that, oh man, on one hand, I'm never going to come back. But on the other hand, some people take it lightly too and think that I can just train through it. So again, it's all about self-awareness.
Yeah. Well, I was just going through some great successes and great failures that I've been involved with as well. And sometimes I can't always predict who is going to have a very triumphant return, and someone who, they really have to change their lives a little bit. They aren't going to be the top competitive whatever sport or athlete that it is. And some people, if they're not an athlete, but they are an occupational athlete, they do certain loading in their job, they may have to change jobs. So, yeah, I've seen it go both ways.
Yep, it's important to inform yourself and get educated for sure. Okay, so Stu, we're coming back with a little bit easier of a question for you. In my practice, I see an anterior iliac rotation of the right side often, as well as a flexed sacral torsions with inferior lateral angle lower on the left and the sucrus at L5S1 deeper on the right. Treating the soft tissue for this doesn't seem to help much. Do you have any suggestions?
And you said that was an easy question.
It was shorter.
Well,
I forgot about that one.
Again, first of all, I would love to know how this clinician detects some of these features. But anyway, how I would go about this is from a generic overview. First of all, I would systematically stress the various tissues and see which motions, postures, and loads trigger pain. Then I would see tissue specific, which tissues, as we stress them, see which ones cause pain. And then I would try and remove those pain triggers by modifying their movement and let the pain settle. Then build the foundation for whatever the task is that they want to do. So restore their normal or optimal mechanics at whatever is appropriate for that person, and see if we can settle down the perceived pain generators. So this clinician has given me some anatomical perceptions. I don't know, A, if I could have detected some of those myself, and B, whether I could have done something about them anyway. But restoring appropriate mechanics would have been the way that I would have gone about it. And again, I bring up you as the perfect example of, we documented in the book the extent of the damaged tissue, and then we documented with a MRI. Was that 3 years after when you first saw me? I think it was a substantial time anyway, 2 or 3 years, and how over that time the tissues had remodeled and built a physical foundation to accept the loads of squats well over 1,000 pounds. And the average person has no idea what a 1,000-pound squat looks like or feels like. And maybe you just want to describe that, Brian, how if you make a 1 millimeter mistake and you're being crushed down by half a ton, where that leads you.
Not in a good place. And that's why you see good lifters, they make mistakes too. You see some of them get buried by a weight, and you ask them what happened. They say, one little thing was off. My eye sight dropped, or my eye gaze dropped down 2 inches, and I looked at someone in the crowd, which threw my hips up and shot my chest down, and I ended up getting buckled over with 1,000 pounds, and then they come back, adjust, and smoke the weight. So, man, every detail, the higher we get towards the most extreme ultimate human performance, the less room for error we have, the less amount of error we have. So when the weight starts getting towards 1,200 pounds and the biggest squats ever taken in powerlifting history, that's all the more they have to be perfect as we start to tap ultimate human potential. And the details matter all the more. The floor grip, the camming, the bending the bar, the line of drive, keeping it, the most efficient stroke possible, and being just efficient with everything we do. And sometimes when you do everything right, that 1,000 pounds feels no different than 600 pounds. Why? Because we treat every weight the same, and you build that internal furnace every weight you take. I've had many times where I took my 900-pound warm-up in the back and it felt terrible. And then I go out and take 10, 20 on the platform and smash it, and it feels even lighter because I've stepped up my mental game even more, and I've dug in, I've locked in. And again, you treat every single weight like 1,000 pounds. Sometimes 1,000 pounds doesn't feel that bad.
Yeah, I know what your answer is going to be to this one, Brian, but I'm just going to lead you with a question. How many perfect lifts have you had in your life?
We're all looking for that perfect stroke, that perfect lift. Maybe one time when I squatted the world record at 275, 1,185 pounds, the same meet that Donnie Thompson totaled 3,000 pounds at. I had lightning in a bottle that day and squatted a 50-pound PR, but that's the closest to a perfect squat I've ever had. But I'm still searching right now on my bench press, dialing in technique right now and just playing with the little nuances that I haven't quite perfected. And I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have some of the best minds at my disposal that I still have not pulled all the potential out of my body to have that perfect lift, because it's so much mind, body, and everything in between. It's years to search after.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say, because the listeners need to hear that from a guy as competent and professional as you. They are now starting to realize how important it is to get it right. And getting it right isn't easy. Getting it right happens once or twice in a career in your game. And but not getting it right day after day will cause stress concentrations, and wherever that stress is, that's the weak part of the body that's going to give.
Yeah, you're only as strong as your weakest link. Okay, so we got the anterior iliac rotation. Dr. McGill, I'm a little confused about how to perform the big three exercises properly. The breathing patterns are stated but not explained. And how do you lift your head off the floor for the curl up without moving your neck? That's sure that's a common one for you. Is there a place we can go to review the exercises in more detail?
Yeah, well, how do you do a curl up without moving the neck? What people need to realize is the curl up's really a bit more of a hover. Just I will cue with my finger in the middle of the sternum and say, just push my finger up there. Now you hover your head, your neck, and your shoulders just a tiny bit off the ground. But, if I'm doing that with a big dude like yourself, or, I won't name any names here, but some of the top power lifters, when they lay on their back, there's no way that their head can even relax on the floor because they've got so much meat on their thoracic spine. So, even then there's no rule. But that really is an anterior chain stiffening exercise. I might forget the curl up for a big, heavy strength athlete. That's not appropriate. That's not the right tool anymore. I might say, do a front plank, roll to a side plank without twisting your spine. Drop an elbow, come right back up again. But you're rotating about the ball and socket joints, not around the core. Now, go to the front plank, close your mouth, and try and blow. And then try and suck in. And then all of a sudden, you're going to feel different parts of the abdominal wall engage and get stiffer and get wiser at stiffening that flexible column to bear these supreme loads. Or we might do stir the pot or whatever. But generally speaking, you can start with doing the curl up if you're a smaller, more modestly built person. And my book, Back Mechanic, does come with a video enhanced version. So it does show the movement of how just to lift the sternum, just a little bit of pressure to slightly elevate the head and shoulders. But as I said, for the big strength athletes, they've got to move on. That's not the right tool.
All right. I think the last couple of questions we have is both of us. Stu?
Okay.
So I'll kick this one off. Okay. Brian and Dr. McGill, what are your thoughts on the popularity of hip thrusters for strength, and is it transferable to the squat and deadlift? How about hypertrophy? I'll start this one off. I think hip thrusters have their place. What I don't like to see is someone who has let's say a 200 or 300 pound deadlift, and they're trying to hip thrust with 200 and 300 pounds or 400 pounds or even more than that. I've known a lot of powerlifters in my time, and I've trained with a lot of them and know their programming, and I've programmed for many of them. And I don't know of any top powerlifters that moved the most weight that used heavy hip thrusters with 5, 6, 7, 800 pounds as a staple assistance exercise. That's not the science. That's just my experience. I personally have never done a hip thruster with more than 135 pounds, and I've deadlifted 850 pounds and I've squatted 1,185 pounds. So that's not me to try to poo-poo the hip thruster, but it is me kind of putting it in its place for strength training. Now, for hypertrophy to build a nice set of glutes, I think it's a staple for a lot of people, but that isn't my expertise. You want to build a good butt or sculpt a nice body, you would probably ask someone else. So I would punt that question. But for strength training, if we have a tier from 1020 Life, which A assistance moves are the big, very complementary movements to the squat, bench, and deadlift, like a pause squat, a board press, a block pull. If that's an A B would be a bent over row, or some kind of dumbbell press, or some kind of chin. Hip thruster would be more of a C, like an afterthought, like a leg extension or something like that. It would be down the road a little bit. I would have people do bird dogs all day over and versions of bird dogs instead of loading up and doing heavy hip thrusters. But that's just me and my experience. What do you think, Stu?
Well, I'm because of the pain is my world, I would have a slightly different answer. Every exercise is a tool, and the hip thrust is a very, very special tool. I have to tell you, I do them very often because I have hip replacement. Back pain and hip pain inhibits the gluteal muscles. The hip thrust can be a very fantastic exercise when it's used in the cerebral context. So to coach it, you get in position, you bend the knees and the hips, obviously. Now try and squeeze your glutes with your brain, and then you can have someone palpate your hamstrings so that you make sure that you're not pushing the heels down and engaging the hamstrings, but now you've connected your brain to the glutes. And the hip thrust is a fantastic exercise for making that connection. And then if you were to push your toes away and begin the elevation and the movement and really engage the glutes and ensure you're doing that through feedback and palpating the hamstrings, it's a fantastic exercise. Well, what I just described is a neurological reprogramming technique from Czechoslovakia and the great teachers Carol Levitt and Vladimir Yonda. So they used the hip thrust in that rehab situation, and then transfer that brain pattern, the muscle memory of engaging the glutes, into the engrams of real life. So the standing squat, now that you've become more clever at engaging the glutes with the thought, spread the floor, as you know, and as we describe in Gift of Injury, and push the hips back. So it's basically a standing hip thrust when you think about it. And our coaching cues: pull your hips through. So these are all things that can be established in people coming from an injury situation. And you know, in our walking interval training that we describe in the book, we progress that actually to walking backwards up the hill and then walking forwards. And those same thoughts and neurological wisdom that you create with the hip thrust can be transferred. So there's some thoughts and maybe a little bit of a different take, but it's a really good tool when used appropriately.
Yep, I agree. And you know, my wife Rhea does them, but not necessarily for strength, but they're great. So everything that we talk about is a tool. It's when tools are abused or misused when they're a problem. And I see a lot of the time people using way too much weight on a hip thruster. Then they're not able to use that activation that Stu's talking about. They're just doing the exercise just for the sake of throwing weight around. And I don't see that as much carryover for a big squat or deadlift, but they certainly have their place just like any tool. What's the next one? Oh, Dr. McGill and Brian, just would like to thank you both for all the work you've done, as it's truly helped me move forward in my career as a strength coach and as someone who has suffered from severe chronic low back pain as well. Anyways, my question is for Dr. McGill. So it's like, hey, Brian, thank you for participating, but now move out of the way. I got a question. I'm just kidding. So at age 20, I was diagnosed with a disc protrusion in my low back that caused me significant pain, example, nerve pain, muscle spasms for about 2 years. I couldn't sleep at night and even contemplating taking my life at one point, similar to Brian's story, since I wasn't getting the right treatment from numerous doctors, PTs, and chiros I had seen. Anyways, after 2 years, I was able to make my own pain-free recovery by taking control of my own rehab and was fortunate enough to stumble upon your material, which was a godsend. Anyways, it's been about 3.5 years since my initial MR, and I recently just had a follow-up, which showed similar results to my initial. This protrusion still exists and hasn't seemed to change at all in structure. Was wondering what the reasoning for this was and why I'm essentially pain-free if the disc protrusion still exists. I understand that I may be desensitized to the pain by now. Just wondering from a physiological standpoint, what may have occurred over the last 3.5 years? Less inflammatory markers accumulating, avoiding pain triggers, etc. Better hydration properties. Just wondering if you could possibly clarify and what might expect or if any changes may occur 10 years from now. So I guess he's wondering why the image hasn't changed. And we know that it isn't necessarily going to change, but I'll let you handle that.
Okay. He's asking me a very specific question for himself, and without assessing him, I really can't give a very specific answer to him and really get a good understanding of his previous pain triggers and where he is now. But, the whole story that was incorporated in the question, it's just a testament to the general process of moving well, stopping the cause of pain, restoring function, and letting the whole pain sensitivity settle down. And your body takes care of this when you have good movement and optimal fitness, not too much and not too little, what you and I now in the stages of our careers are trying to achieve. But it also depends on the type of disc protrusion as well, and I would see that by looking at the MR. If it's a very focal kind of disc bulge, or if the disc has been flattened, say the real mechanism was an end plate fracture, the bone top and bottom, and that's what you had, Brian. You had multiple end plate fractures and you'd lost disc height, but those can be sealed up just with healing, but you've let a little bit of air out of the tire, if you want to use that analogy. You've let a little bit of the gel out of the disc. So it's going to be riding a little flat and it bulges all around, and that's just the way it is. But with movement, the nerves learn to flow around that disc bulge. The muscles are developed. It sounds as though he's still training very well. The muscles are developed around it, really acting as a robust guy wire system. He's doing well. All I can say is congratulations. You found the way. Where does this take you in the future? No one knows, but I will go back to a previous answer. Those who maintain good spine fitness and don't get sucked into becoming a yoga master with lots and lots of mobility in your spine. If you do that, chances are you will have more arthritis with more movement as you age. Whereas the bigger, heavier, stiffer type of spine doesn't seem to age in such a detrimental way. And when I think of the old powerlifters that I know, they don't complain about their backs. They complain about their shoulders, hips, and knees. And certainly the Olympic lifters, think of the old retired Olympic lifters. Most of them are worried about their knees elbows, wrists, and shoulders. Occasionally, I'll see one for back issues, but I'm seeing many more people who had a lot of mobility in their spine and using it through the full range of motion rather than using their hips and shoulders. So there's just a little bit of a generic uh, prediction or prognosis for that particular question.
Yeah, and so the MR is not always, it's a tool again to kind of get a diagnosis, but if it doesn't change and you're pain free, then hey, we were unsure about how mine was going to look too, Stu.
Yeah, we were both really interested to see how you were going to look on the follow-up MR, and we were both pleasantly, and I'm not going to use the word surprise, but we were both pleasantly titillated with
Yeah, we're thankful. This was a cool. It was like it was a good part for the case study to show what can happen, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's about all the questions that we have here. We've covered a lot of stuff in the last hour. We hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sending your questions in. I know we've had a couple questions or more than a couple pop up as we were doing this. Stu, someone asked us if we're going to do seminars because they're getting so much out of this video and furthering people's education. We'll talk about that a little bit later after we get this book stabilized and we finish promoting it and on to the next thing. But we appreciate you guys supporting the book. If you love it, hey, throw an Amazon review up for us. For those watching this video at a later date, you can grab it at backfitpro.com, powerxstrength.com, or on amazon.com or amazon.ca. Stu, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, two things, I guess. I'll just echo support for what you just said, Brian. And I'm so glad that it's helping people and really giving a little bit of confidence about their futures, which is so gratifying for me. So I'll just finish up by saying something about you. And I don't really get a chance to say these sorts of things publicly, but when I first met you and started working with you, obviously the dynamic was probably more me giving you a little bit of guidance and advice. But over the years, as we became such good friends, I have to say thank you for transferring so much of your knowledge. It was a hard-won knowledge and a different knowledge back to me. So I would say now that after a few years of our great friendship, we're both better people for it. And if we can transfer that combined knowledge and a little bit of love for what we do, and also the love for trying to help people as we get through life, then I don't think it gets any better than that.
That's pretty good. Thank you for the kind words. The pleasure's been mine. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Any questions, check out our website, shoot us an email, shoot a comment. And thank you so much for the support of Gift of Injury. We did it for you guys to tell the story, and we'll talk to you very soon. Look for more from Stu and I in the next couple of months. And good night.
Good night, everyone.